Our journey at Villgro Africa, we started in 2021, where we were fortunate to do the first call for early stage AI innovators in Africa. That was in partnership with IDRC, the Canadian Development Center, and we looked for anybody basically casting a net to say who was working on AI innovations in Africa, not just health, but across sectors. And so we received a strong contingent of companies, across sectors, but a lot of them were in healthcare. So in 2022 through 2023, we had another round, what we called AI for Health. And so again, we supported a number of companies providing some early stage seed funding and a lot of technical support to help them understand and navigate the AI universe. Now, at that time, it was still, ChatGPT did not break out yet. It was still a buzzword that a lot of people knew. And if you were in the industry, you knew, but a lot of people didn't. And certainly a lot of early stage innovators in Africa were not really aware. During that time, in late 2023, we were linked up with GIZ, and we were able to take this even further to say, hey, how can we support African and Asian innovators to understand and even develop revenue or models around AI? And so this presentation today will give you a background of what we did, what we learned, and I think there'll be a lot of learnings. I like to call some things like this often a buffet. You'll see a lot of different slides, a lot of different context and information shared. You'll pick up what you think is most valuable for you, but we encourage you to please use the chat. And so we'll be monitoring the chat for any questions that come along, and we'll try to find some time along the journey to answer them. And so let's jump right in though. Winnie, if you could share the screen again, and we'll jump in and then we'll push through there. Thank you. I'm joined today by my two colleagues at Villgro, Winnie and then Dio. Maybe just give a 15-second introduction, please, and then we'll jump in.
Winnie, do you go first?
Go ahead, Video.
All right. So, hi, everyone. It's great to see you all here. This is a very exciting session regarding open source AI because a lot of innovations is happening on the continent, but many of people, especially companies, that are still worrying about opening up their data, their models, whatever they're building. But this session will give you an opportunity to learn that it's still possible to do business even when you're opening up part of your products. So my name is Diogratias Nzorikwao. I am AI sector lead at Villgro Africa. My quick background is in tech. I have a first degree in electronics and communication engineering. Then I went to China where I did my master's in artificial intelligence. Then I ended up in the UK where I did my PhD in the applications of AI in healthcare, and I've been with Villgro as an AI sector lead for over 3 years now. Please welcome and let's enjoy the session.
Thank you, Dr. Dio. Winnie, the presentation dropped off there. Okay, thank you. Great. And
thank you. Yep. So my name is Winnie Wangari. I'm the medtech lead at Villgro Africa. Been part of the team from the beginning. Happy to be part of this, sharing our insights, learnings throughout the program. Hopefully we could get much participations in terms of the questions that we'll be able to answer throughout this entire session. And happy to have you all here. Thank you. Over to you, Rob.
Great. Thanks, Winnie. Next slide, please. And next one. Thanks. So we're just going to give you a brief intro. We're going to start with the Fair Forward team. We're joined by Daniel and Jonas from GIZ, who will give us a little bit of background into Fair Forward. Please, over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Rob, and I hope you can hear me well. Thank you as well, Winnie and Dio. My name is Daniel Brummond. I work for a project called, I'm here together with my colleague Jonas Gramse, who's also going to say something just now. I work, and we both work for an initiative called Fair Forward, Artificial Intelligence for All, which is implemented by GIZ or GIZ on behalf of our Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And yeah, just to keep it very short, very basically, our goal is to work with partners, with 7 partners, well, partners in 7 countries rather, in Africa and in Asia, to really promote an approach to AI that is more open, more inclusive, and more sustainable. In that, open source plays a big role in terms of access to the technology, in terms of building up not single actors, but whole ecosystems and other aspects. And we do that through supporting the creation of training data sets in domains ranging from language AI to agriculture to climate-related topics, through also working and promoting on skills development programs, for example, in the form of boot camps specifically aimed at women. And then thirdly, also through working with partner governments on policies and policy framework around how to approach AI in country and from a more trustworthy and ethical angle. And yeah, very excited for this program. As Rob has said, it's been running for a bit over a year. We've had 2 cohorts, and you'll hear all about it just now. And I'm happy to pass over to my colleague Jonas.
Yeah, just to share a bit of the rationale behind why we also did this. On the next slide, you'll see that we pursue a couple of general principles that underlie all our funding efforts and activities in those 7 countries in Africa and Asia. And I think, well, first of all, it's obviously important to align the use of AI with the Sustainable Development Goals. That's the core of our work. Then also to make sure that actually you use AI not just for the sake of using the technology, but actually to tackle a specific problem. But then we came to a point sort of, 2 years back from now when we started this, to actually also look at the long-term sustainability of our products and assets. So as you can imagine, we have been developing a lot of prototypes with our partners in those countries, now over 50 prototypes and use cases at various degrees of maturity that we have in sort of open source formats out there. So this could be data sets and applications and so on. And how do we actually make sure that these also get used beyond the funding timeline, right? So that was one of our main concerns and why we initiated this program. And then also, if you look at the right side there, it's important for us to empower the local ecosystem through these open source assets, so data sets and applications. But at the same time, it's also really important for us to make sure that we can build local markets with these sort of structures, so that these organizations, be it NGOs or startups, may push along and use these assets in a way that at some point they might also not then use donor funding anymore and can build this on a sustainable business model. So with that, enough context, and let's get into what has happened over the last few years and our learnings, and also some practical examples to hear from some startups.
Thanks, Jonas. We'll just give a quick teaser on Villgro of who we are. We invest and support early stage health and life science ventures across Africa. We often work in a One Health lens, and so which means we work across sectors, and we have a number of ag work and ag related projects as well. You see a bit of our touch points. We're about to enter our 10th year in 2025, and so we essentially work with a lot of companies where we often deploy capital, but we invest it like venture capitalists. We help them grow their company. We make whatever money we give catalytic to unlocking others to help them grow and develop. That's at a core of what Villgro does. Next slide. I'm just going to go over this quickly, but we obviously look for a lot of different companies through thematic calls. We provide a lot of technical assistance, very similar to the project with GIZ and others. We have subject matter experts on our team, which makes it really easy when you have resources like Dr. Dio and Winnie on the medtech side and other focus areas and engineers. It makes it really easy to deliver a solid program. And so we're grateful for that assistance. We do, like I mentioned, seed capital, a lot of thematic calls. There's a bit of a touch points with the various organizations that we've supported in Africa over the last nine years. And so a bit of context there. And I shared already about our AI journey with AI for D in 2021 and then AI for H in 2022 and 2023, and augmented that with the amazing work with GIZ on their cohort of companies to better understand how we can make these organizations sustainable, i.e. how do they get some kind of funding or some kind of sources of funding so they can see their innovations grow and develop. And so that's what we're at, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I think I'm going to hand it over to Winnie, who's going to take us through a little bit of the context of how we approached it, a bit of the mentorship. Oh, sorry, thanks. Before we do, we had a strong team. So a lot of these organizations were aligned with solid mentors. This is a strong pool. We're not going to go over them, but there was a strong base of technical support behind the program to make sure that we delivered a quality content as best as we could, knowing that AI is very new. If it was already new in the global north, it's very new in Africa. And that's, that was what it was like a few years ago. And thankfully, it's developing so fast. It's amazing. But I'll hand it over to Winnie on the overview of the program.
Thank you, Rob. Just to mention a bit what we've been able to work on the entire program, as it was mentioned by Jonas and Daniel in regards to the focus that it has been looking for towards this particular mentorship program, focusing on Asia and Africa, targeting how do we actually develop sustainable business models or even funding models for open source applications, whether looking at non-commercial support or even commercial support, to be in a position to understand how this particular element could bring into board the understanding of how these goals and direction could actually be successful. So some of the features we've been able to look at, which was to understand the type of mentors who can actually brought on board, who bring the idea of all open source mindset together with the business mindset, and also trying to see how to motivate the companies into advancing further away from open source application being not only free, but it can be sustainable. And through that, engaging them further in a lot of peer learning sessions that will be talking through them in the different thematic themes in the next coming slides. That endeavored into one-on-one meetings whereby further conversations were made, a little bit more of an exercise to foresee how companies do really wish to actually uptake some of this conversation moving forward, even after the particular cohort we've been able to support. That also include introducing them to some of existing companies that have been able to be successful, and they've been part of the peer learning workshop, followed up by one-on-one meetings, considering all the economic factors and cultural differences being placed whether in Asia or in Africa. So all by all, some of the general challenges and also we've been able to encounter is open source being described, which is an element of AI system that actually is governed by having training data, the code component, the public good, digital public good, which is basically open source is working with the community. The potential benefit of this particular open source AI as an application is that one is able to democratize the AI, bring in the community in practice, because you are able to work with the community, you're able to persevere a particular challenge that you are able to do that. And given that area of an understanding, one is able to accelerate further. And now that comes into the idea, what does the business aspect come to to this, and some of the things that we've been able to understand as we were doing the initial knowledge gap to see what is it that the open source applications exist, and what is the understanding the particular companies have. And we saw that legal and intellectual property is an issue, understanding who is the owner, what are the type of licenses you need to attribute to, given that you actually work with the community, and also the funding challenges, which we've been able to see that the uncertainty of who are the people you need to go to fundraise. How do you fundraise? Looking for one application to be successful. What are the kind of business models that you need to onboard to ensure that you have a value proposition that is sustainable in the long run? And that is what we'll be speaking to in the upcoming slides, just to understand what are the idea around how to build up on this knowledge, given that we've understood the unique challenges that they face as on open source applications out there. So generally, what we've been guided since this was just a program running through some of the participants that will be able to showcase the case study will be present here just to present that. It's just a generic understanding of how we'll be able to evaluate the candidates who will be able to join, understand the actual expert who will be able to bring in the strength that is needed, having identified the unique challenges. What are the exact peer learning workshops that will be able to cover this common understanding when it comes to sustainability to open source businesses, whether looking at non-commercial and commercial, and matching them very well with a mentor who could bring that understanding broadly, and talking about more and more about introducing them to such companies that have been able to bring in the understanding that been successful so far when it comes to open source licenses and businesses that could leverage their growth. So I'll hand it over to Dio, who will introduce us to our first common thematic themes that you've been able to cover, both as a workshop and that transition into one-on-one conversations during the meetings that we've had with the participants. So over to you, Dio.
All right. Thank you very much, Winnie, for breaking the ice. So basically, whenever you are developing an AI model, and you need to have a picture in your mind for what purpose. Is it going to be fully commercial, or is it for open source? So in this slide, I will explain the AI project canvas, things which you need to note whenever you are developing an AI solution, which can tell you how we are going to develop the business model out of the solution. Because sometimes we have seen that happening with ChatGPT when it started with OpenAI, but now with ChatGPT 3.5 going above, you need to start paying for some of the subscriptions. To take an example, now we are using Instagram, WhatsApp for free. I remember when Elon Musk was taking over Twitter, transforming it into X, there were some rumors that we will start being charged. So try to imagine the way we are used to these platforms, and all of a sudden we are required to pay. So you can see actually the transition when you want to stop charging people, putting everything as open source. You lose a lot of customers. So there are things which you need to consider from the first moment when you are developing the solutions, which will tell you about the business model you'll be developing. So starting with the first point is on the concept. Try to think of the problem that you are developing. Yes, we understand AI is an attractive term. It is attracting a lot of funders, attracting a lot of intention, but it's not every problem wants an AI solution. I'll give you an example with Zanzibar. I think most of us know Zanzibar. According to statistics, it shows that more than 40% of tourists who visit Zanzibar never revisit the island, and nobody knows why. And when doing data analysis, it's a project which was supported by the UNDP. During the implementation of that project, we came to learn that there's some false information about Zanzibar. One of the tourists was mentioning that in Zanzibar it's impossible to get anti-malaria drug. We all know in Africa, you can just go to even simple pharmacy and you can get anti-malaria drug. So someone was trying to build a solution out of that by building an AI tool which can be used by tourists to get healthcare information on where they can get particular drugs. But and he wanted to use AI. in our opinion, we advise that person that you don't need to go to AI, but you can put these information, so the right information in the right sources instead of having an AI, because you will need to collect data for that. You need to develop, you need to deploy that solution. So the cost that will be incurring to develop that kind of tool, and you know, tourists, they can visit a place maybe once a year or twice a year. So having that tool, try to imagine you download an application which you will use it for just a week and get rid of it. So business-wise, it doesn't make sense. So on the concept, you need to understand what is the problem that you are trying to solve. Are the current solutions doesn't fit and needs an AI, or AI is going to add more cost on that. So this is the thing which we really need to consider. Apart from the attractiveness of funding, the previous thing of the AI is something which we really need to consider. The second part, which I've also highlighted, is on the data. Now you realize that you have to create an AI solution. Where do you get that data? We've seen, especially in Africa, we don't have public available data set. And this is why I like open source AI. But try to put these things open, like your data, your models, without hurting your business, that you can stay sustainable. But when you look at the global north, if I go on Google, I need breast cancer data sets. You can find maybe 3 or 4 sources. And I can download those data sets, although it is for academic or maybe for non-commercial use, but at least I have somewhere where I can learn and practice my AI skills. But in Africa, to get that data set, which really reflect the context of Africa, is very, very difficult. So this is one of the things which the GIZ is trying to address through this open source. So thinking on the data, what are the internal and external data sets? You might be running a company which is already producing some data, and you want to leverage that, but also at the same time, you need to get data from other sources. Taking the example of that guy who wanted to create an AI solution, which will inform tourists on where they can get particular drugs. So let's say in his tour business, through the data, he can know the number of tourists coming, how they can download the tool and everything, but he will need data from these healthcare pharmacies to know which type of drug they have, because you may recommend drug A, but when the tourist goes to the pharmacy, they find drug B. So you need to have real-time information of the stock of types of drugs that each pharmacy have, which is very difficult to implement, because the pharmacists, they can just change the drug depending on the business anytime they want without informing you. And you're not providing anything to that. So it's something which you really need to consider. And also, how will you connect to the source of data? You are sitting in your garage developing the AI tool. How do you get the real-time information, the stock of the data set which is being delivered to the downtown, to the stone town in the middle of Zanzibar, while you are sitting maybe in Dar es Salaam or in Nairobi? How do you get that data set in real time? And there are many pharmacies there. So this is the thing which initially when you're creating the solution, you may overlook, but on the long run, they're going to hurt you. Now, you know the data set, you have a concept, you know the problem that you want to fix, it is legitimate. Now you have to think of the model. Which model are you going to use? This is where the challenge comes, because many people can go on convolutional neural networks. Sometimes people talk about logistic regressions, but every model in the AI was designed for particular problems. When you are dealing with image data, it's when you go into convolutional neural networks like the CNN type of thing. When you are dealing with time series data, now you go into the LSTM, the transformers. When you are dealing with language data, or when you are dealing with physiological signals from the human body, that's when you go into recursive neural network and those kind of things. So you need to understand which type of model, because on the concept, you know the problem you want to fix. You know the data that you are going to use to train your model. Now, which model are you going to train? So thinking of these 3 points will tell you the estimated cost or the type of effort that you need to put on in order to deliver the solution. Then from there, now you have the data set to train your model. You know the model you are going to train. How do you know the model works? This comes on the metric. How do you test that model while you are sitting in your lab? You are sitting on your computer. How do you know it works? I've seen a couple of guys who have their solution failed in the clinical settings. They're trying to develop a solution in their lab. Then they go straight to deploy it in clinical settings, and it doesn't work. I've seen some guys saying they're going for clinical validation while they're still going for data collection. I've seen some guys using data set from Europe to develop an AI tool that they wanted to work in Goma, in Congo, which is a very totally different settings. A very basic thing to share in the US, there are some credit scoring companies which uses social media data. But someone wanted to create a credit scoring system here in Africa. Where do you get social media data in Africa? Because you need approval to access someone's data, which is available in the US. So that guy advised us, like, maybe we can use data from the US to create a credit scoring system that will work in Africa. I said, no. It doesn't work that way, because something which I've witnessed and many of you from the Global South, you'll agree with me. It's very common to see someone who will go to the rich suburbs in Nairobi taking pictures while he's living in Kibera, just to take the pictures. So if you use this guy's picture, you might think he's somewhere in the middle level on the rich class, and you may score him high to get some credits to get loan from the bank. But in reality, he just borrowed his clothes from the neighbor, and he took his matatu to the rich suburbs in Nairobi, and it's not true. And another basic thing, if we want to go on this digital transfer of money, like the M-Pesa, it's possible that I can load a lot of money to my house girl's SIM card and instruct her to go and pay for electric bills. So if you use her mobile transaction records, you might think she's making a lot, but it was just passing in the account. The same thing happens if you want to provide credit scoring for myself, using my salary account. I don't do transactions in bank. When that money lands in my account, I transfer it to my mobile money account, and I start doing transactions. So you can see these differences. So we all need to now understand the context. Something which works in Europe, in the global north, doesn't work in Africa. So we need to develop this solution for Africa. And this is why open source AI is pretty much important, that we need data set from Africa that can address the challenges in Africa. So going from the metric, now we'll talk about the infrastructure. Now you know the data, you know the model that you are going to deploy. What about the infrastructure? How are you going to maintain that data? You want to open source your data. How long we'll have a server which will be online all the time with sustainable internet, sustainable electricity, so people can download data anytime. Try to imagine this. We're all used to WhatsApp, and maybe you stay for some days and WhatsApp is offline, just because there's no electricity in their server in Europe. It doesn't make sense, right? So you need to sit to also look in the infrastructure for training your models, because sometimes you take a lot of data that you want to fix a particular problem, and that type of data needs a lot of computing devices. I remember one of the example, I remember it was 4 years ago when I just came back in Tanzania. One guy in a panel discussion said, like, many people are overthinking about AI, that they need these computing resources. Then later on, when I had a close conversation with that guy, I just came to learn that he was working on a cat-dog model for classification, which is a very simple problem. And that data set was around the 50 MB. Now I'm working on a cardiovascular problem, and the data set is videos and image with over 40 GB. Like, even when I load that model in my computer crashes. So it's impossible for that thing to work. So just don't think like, no, it's not possible. Maybe if you are talking about toy projects that someone can use for teaching, but when you're talking about the real life project, you need to think of infrastructure. And unfortunately, statistics shows that these computing infrastructures, they're more expensive in developing countries than in the developed countries. I think many of you have seen the struggle that when you want to go on AWS or on Google Cloud, the cost that you have to incur to train your models, to deploy your models, and those kind of solutions. I'll show you an example to deal with that particular problem. This is an example of a mini supercomputer that you can use for offline deploying of your model. It doesn't need internet. We all know the problem of internet in Africa. So working on this mini supercomputer can be one of the possible solutions to address these challenges. So you need also to think of the infrastructures whenever you are addressing these problems. So going on number 6 on the pipeline. how will you connect all services? Try to think of the guy in Zanzibar who was trying to develop an AI tool to inform tourists on where they can get essential drugs whenever they are visiting Zanzibar. So how everything is connected to the rest? How is that tool connected to the updates of the drug list available in a particular supermarket, and those kind of things? And will your model run in batches or in real time? If we all know, go on ChatGPT now, we can ask different questions, and the model can reply in real time to the specific topics. You can ask about agriculture, can ask about economics, someone can ask about the status of war in Ukraine, someone can ask about mpox, and the model will respond in real time. So how is your model going to work? Is it in batch or in real time? In batch, it's like collecting a number of questions first, then sending them in batch-wise, and you get your response after a few minutes. So going on to number 7 is on maintenance. I will use the example of Facebook. There was an internet shutdown which happened a few months back. It was around the world, but more significant in East Africa. And I think Kenya was the first country to go back online real fast compared to the rest. And it was a struggle. We didn't know how much we are depending on the internet until that day. Like, I can't do any transaction, I can't communicate because most of the people I'm talking to, they're outside my country. It was chaos. Now try to imagine that you're used to Instagram, you're used to WhatsApp, your business relies there, and you're offline for just 6 hours just because WhatsApp, they're updating their version from version 8 to 10, for example. So you need to know on the maintenance, how are you going to update from one version to another? All of these things will tell you the total cost that you'll need in order for your business to be sustainable. So whenever we are talking about open source tools, we also have to think of the cost that we'll be incurring, because we don't want you to open source for 1 or 2 months. We need it to be there forever. So going to number 8. Now you know the type of data, you know the models that you are going to use, you know the maintenance, you know the pipeline. Now think of the team. We've seen some startups, they're still in the ideation, and their team is already 10 people. Sometimes you ask like, okay, why your team is so big? I remember one of the team I met, they even had someone who was responsible for social media outreach. They're still in the ideation stage. So I asked them like, okay, why do you need someone for social media? You're still in the ideation stage. You don't need to advertise anything. For them, it was like a group of friends. Just because they are friends, they wanted to have that team. So it will add cost. And that cost, when you want to open source, you have to take that cost to the end user. So opening sources can be a very problem. Just a very basic example. Telegram, with over 900 million users, is having full-time workers around 50. That's Telegram with over 900 million users. So you can actually see, and I saw one of the interview of the founder of Telegram said when they were starting, they're just 3, and they're all developers. So you can see, like, most of the time, I've started a company early when I was still in school, and it died in a very short period of time, just because it was a group of friends. We didn't think of who is bringing what. For us, it was like, we have a company. We're cool. So whenever we go for open source, you find out you are having a lot of cost to pay, which doesn't tell. And on the last one is on the cost. So looking back now from all the points that I've been mentioning, it will tell you the cost, which will help you guide and what we have to pay for. For the tourist in Zanzibar, he will pay for your service just to know the type of drug which are available in the nearby. So we don't know how many tourists will get sick in Zanzibar and how long they will stay in Zanzibar. So do you imagine like someone paying for your service just wants to use it and leave? You won't it is hard to make them stay using your service. So they use your service, they'll go. So who will be paying for your service? So let's not just think of the AI solution, but also having this whole pipeline that who is going to pay. It will drive you, it will help you with clear information whenever you want to develop the business model now out of it. And also, how much do we have to pay? Are we willing to pay $50 a month just to use Instagram or to use Facebook? It doesn't make sense. So whatever resources we are committing in, we have also to think of the end user, how much they will be willing to pay. Win, can you push the slide up a bit? So basically, I will close up my session on the course. Now, looking back in all the 9 elements, it will help you understand how much you are going to charge these people and how to develop the business model. I'll pass this to my colleague, Rob, based on this information and on how now we can develop the business model out of the understanding of the problem we are trying to solve. Thank you very much. Rob, to you.
Thank you, Dr. Dio. That's great. Now, some of you may have noticed, some of you with a bit of a business background may have noticed a familiarity between the AI model canvas and this traditional business model canvas, because they are designed very similarly. I'm not going to go through the level of detail, on today's call, because this is more about AI and more about what Dr. Dio shared. But it is really important for our early stage innovators and AI practitioners to have a solid understanding of the cost and the rationale that Dr. Dio just shared, because that is the input that's needed to go into the traditional business model canvas. So he's given you the toolkit to sort of understand and build your framework of what you're thinking about and aspects to consider before you integrate it into a traditional business model. Because even if you're using open source, this business, it's if you're going to have any form of revenue generation or any aspect of sustainability related to money, this business model canvas can still be applicable. And so I'm just going to go real quick on it. Understanding your customers, who are you going to serve? Let me give you a bit of advice. Is what we find, a lot of companies or early stage innovators do not probably give enough weight in their thinking to who the ultimate user or person that's going to procure it or buy it, or who that is. So, we like to call it early adopter. I would really encourage you, as you're developing your model, give some thought to who do you know would be the earliest adopter. So if your model worked and you've got it, it's working flawlessly, if you're really good about it, who are those people or organization would you go to in order to get them to use the model? And be careful not to say buy it, but or to use it. Really identify that early on. John Maxwell, a famous leadership person, has a quote: begin with the end in mind. Really important. Really encourage you to do that. Begin with the end in mind. Assuming your model works, who or your AI innovation or your service that you're developing, who do you think will use it? And then validate that. It'd be great to have a conversation with these kind of people before you begin, because that will give you amazing insight as you're developing it. And if you really land on something solid, it also is your rocket fuel, to use the Elon Musk. We all see that rocket go up. It'll be your rocket fuel, because you'll feel really energized because you already have identified somebody that would likely use your product or service that you're developing. Okay, so value, so that's customer, your value proposition. What value are you creating? Make sure that it's really clear that you understand the problem. Another way to put that, early adopter, is who shares the problem that you're working on and that your solution will solve. Who shares it with you? Simply that. Who else feels that pain as much as you do, that to the point that they're willing to use it or willing to partner or willing to engage with you to develop that solution there? And obviously 3 and 4 are channels of relationships. How do you reach those people, and how do you develop and access them? Again, this is more of a go-to-market talk, but we're not going to get into that on this one. Really identify though the resources and the partners that you need in order to join your journey. I know, for instance, if you're in the AI development space, NVIDIA and others, and Microsoft and other are Google AI. There's strong partners that have the resources to give GPUs or give in-kind support. And so you want to reach out and be really particular at finding those type of partners. And then obviously costs and I'll speak a little bit about revenue. So I won't speak about revenue streams, because that's going to come in a bit. But costing is important, and I want to jump off on, because cost is a similar one with what Dr. Dio just shared. AI development, which we all know and you guys all know, is not free. It costs money, and it's really important to document and really get a handle on how much it actually costs. If you're going to have an AI business, you know, you want to have a strong sense of what your costs are in order to maintain and create a bit of a financial model or budgeting around it. And that's also really important if you're looking for external funding, because you're going to have to understand your costs in order to convince or get other funding partners on board. So I'll just stop right now in the models. Is there any immediate question that someone might have? And we encourage you to use the chat around business models. Is there a burning question that someone has? And please feel free to use the chat. Oh, okay, so that's a little bit about AI model and how the AI business model toolkit fits well into a traditional business model. Next slide, please. Okay, this is probably one of the most interesting slides we have today. There's lots coming, but this is sort of an interesting one. Oh, Victor, you just led that perfectly. It's almost like I prompted you. Victor asked here, what are some revenue streams from open source solutions? Well, there we go. This slide begins to flesh this out. This is a bit of a framework of how other people have approached it. And we use names that you might be familiar with to kind of give you an idea. There's certain companies that leverage this type of revenue or funding models. Okay, sponsorships and donations. Okay, voluntary contributions that people make because your service foundations or donors are so compelled to give because what you're working on is usually for some kind of public good or a very broad purpose that has broad impact or public benefit. You know, you see Wikipedia there, Linux as well. I think we have LDRI, one of our companies there, even in the GIZ cohort. I think they're on the call. You know, you have, and there's Ushahidi as well. Do you guys know Ushahidi? It's come out of Kenya. It's a very solid platform, and they rely on donors for that. So that's one, that it's a quote a business model, that because these people are businesses. Even Wikipedia has bills to pay. They're still a business or NGO or whatever. They still have to run it. They have revenue and expenses and they have to track it in that way. And so that's one particular one. We have I'll jump to a freemium model. There's lots of freemium models. You guys probably know. I'm a bit of I want to believe an older athlete. I'm in my 60s now, and I do a lot of sports. And Strava is an app that it's free, but if you want, to track your activity, and it gives you some rudimentary statistics and stuff, and you can share with your friends, kind of like the Facebook for exercise. But if you want to have all the features, obviously you have to pay. And we all know what freemium is. I think we're fairly comfortable with that. And so companies offer a base set of functionality of their system that usually has broad appeal, and then they try to hive off a portion of that as paying people that really want to have a particular piece or have an advanced features, and they're willing to pay for it. And you see Dropbox there, you guys, and WordPress, those are some that you're probably familiar with, and they use that type of background. Okay, or that type of model. Service and support based model. Okay, paid services. It's software. There's a base set that's available, but then the companies offer advanced features that they're willing to author or write certain modules or support it for you going further. And so there's examples of that as well. That's there. You'll see a lot of that as well. And Red Hat, open core models. Okay, provides a core version of the software And although if you want additional features, you have to pay for it. We were on a call yesterday with one of our companies, and they work in open SRP. It's kind of an open source medical platform for medical records and transfer of data across platforms using FHIR and other standards. But this company there's a base code that's free, but then everybody wants modifications. And so whether it's World Health or different customers or UNICEF or other people that use it, they will then leverage or go to this company and they'll write features that augment their functionality of that OpenSRP software. There's different examples of that. That's quite popular. You see GitLab and others there as well. We put ThinkMD, another GSZ company has something like that as well, and they're working on that. So that is okay. Platform and cloud-based models. You see, there's a number there, and obviously NVIDIA, they deliver software as a service model on a platform, and you gain access to their infrastructure, and you pay for it. It's open and it's available, but you have to pay to use it. That's it. Oh, by the way, and there, I've learned I'm a self-confessed sort of business person, and sometimes people have meant open source equals always free. I'm sort of the camp that's not necessarily true. Open means available. It's openly available, but you can use it or purchase additional features. I know there's some purists that are out there that are like open source should always be only free or else it's not really open source. And that's true. That's a perspective. Absolutely, I get it. But there's also a definition. Hey, it's open and available, but if to unlock features, you do have to pay. So it's sort of like there's some nuances there, and I know there's probably some that will kick back at me on that. But that's one perspective that many use. And then data and API based models as well, and they access different data and they provide APIs. MCOPA, you guys, MCOPA offers they're a solar system. They provide solar access to communities and really a green energy access, and they have these APIs for payment that they make open source that makes available. And so there's different pieces of that there. There are probably a few others, but this is largely a particular, different revenue models can be found in different elements of these 6 that we shared. Just going to stop there. Is there any questions or sort of observations from anybody there? Please, again, feel free to use the chat. We would love to and Daniel, thank you. Oh wow, we should have caught that. Daniel made a good point. OpenAI has gone entirely for profit and closed source. So that's yes. Thanks for that observation. We'll have to fix this in future. Thank you for that. And any question? You can see the combinations that we shared already with the AI canvas, the business model canvas, and the type of revenue. You can see where we're heading here. We're sort of getting you to think about how you, not knowing what you're working on, but how your solution will begin to generate revenue to become sustainable, as opposed to just sort of I'll just leave it at that. Next slide. I'm going to hand this over to Winnie. This is a big part. IP and management is a big part in open source as well. Over to you, Winnie.
Thank you, Rob. Given the circumstances that you really need to rely much on data, growing on your AI algorithm, and the other components that you really need to actually have a working open source AI, and you really need to understand the actual business that comes into understanding of how sustainable that is. In the long run, we saw the gap that the licenses comes into play and attribute to the restrictions into which businesses will be sustainable in the long run. So whichever decision that you are able to build upon your algorithm is also restricted to the license that you will be able to create. And majority of the companies over the world, as you can see on the examples, have been able to create using Creative Commons licenses as a concept into which they've been able to use as part of their open source to users and deepen that understanding of how they could actually leverage the way they will be able to be sustainable from the business perspectives. And generally, these are just the 6 common licenses that has been used over the time. And you can see we're starting off with the proprietary license, that this particular license basically gives you all rights to the author, basically the owner of this license, and then you're able now to use it without any permission and transition it into their own right. Same way we've been able to use Microsoft, Adobe, to be in a position to actually use these permissions, and also that still belongs to the users of these licenses. The second one is on the permissive license. This has been usually broadly. You come across licenses like Apache, MIT, GNU use so much and broadly over the last couple of companies like MongoDB, who have been able to use that if you've ever come across that platform. So permissive licenses is a license that is able to provide few restrictions to the use, the distribution, and modification. So basically, it is able to be more restrictive in such a manner that you're able to attribute to it. And the other license is copyleft. These particular licenses, you are able to provide permission to use it, freely use it, distribute it, redistribute it to cover what kind of, or to cover what particular element of IP you want to reorganize. And given that a lot of these copyleft mechanisms, you're able now to have royalty free, which is a good thing. The other element of licenses that has been commonly used is the rail responsible AI licenses that people like Facebook, Microsoft have been able to onboard. This license speaks to enabling access and distribution of the artifacts responsible for this particular license. So you're able to especially use it, distribute it to whatever length that you want to use it without no restrictions binded to it. And the public domain equivalent licenses, this particular one acts as a waiver in which you allow to use the copyrighted work unconditionally, avoiding the complexity of the license itself. And the other last one, which speaks to the Creative Commons license itself, that advocates to some rights are reserved and some rights are not reserved. With no restriction, you can reuse it, no special explicit permission that is needed to use it. So when you're choosing the type of data, how you grow your algorithm, how you'll be able to work with the community so that you're able to have an open source AI application, considering what Dio had mentioned in regards to understanding the broadness of where this AI application is gonna be achieved, looking at the infrastructure, the metrics, all that accounts as well in terms of understanding, given that Rob has mentioned, it's not, open source does not mean it's free. So the license that is built within the AI itself comes with the use of IP that you could onboard in the case that you really need to have IP onboarded into your open source application, considering that this particular type of license that you might want to choose might actually interfere with the type of business models you might want to onboard. So choosing carefully about where and how you onboard a particular license to be in a position to attribute to your open source AI application in whatever manner. Please also consider how does that relate very well with the type of business model so that you are not restrictive to a manner that you're not able to broaden up your actual sustainable angle that you are thinking about. There's also a consideration that you are not restricted to one type of licenses. You can actually have multiple licenses that enables you to choose as well multiple business models that you'll be able to apply in the long run, as looking to the understanding that open source doesn't mean open, but it has the advantage of you using the different rights, using the different restrictions, using the different waivers within the different type of licenses you put into on board, for you to be in a position to broaden the multiple type of business models that you can onboard, as you'll be able to look at what are the business angles that I can have, what are the licenses that could contribute to my funding model, so that I'm in a position to gain more funding, gain more tractions, and such things as that. So allow me to move as well to the next slide that can speak to the type of investment you should be able to look for if you're in the open source AI area. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Winnie. You guys are probably getting a sense in, we've been at this for a little 45 minutes also my camera, 1 second. And drinking from a fire hose might begin to make sense. So we're throwing a lot of content at you, a lot of things to think about, and that's intentional. And by the way, we're happy to have a conversation about content and sort of specific things. You know, this little slide is just to sort of talk about funding options. Where do you get funding? You know, oftentimes you might be successful at getting an initial grant of some idea or some, you know, but how do you go from there? And that's a tough question, and it's a tough journey that every entrepreneur faces around the world, by the way. And just want to talk about types of capital first, and in no particular order, but I'm just gonna. There's obviously, you know, on the left, I'm referring to the left, the types of options. There's individual investors, people, you know, there are people that just like to invest and spend their own personal money in startups or in ideas, and that's one. There's institutional investors. The other realm is companies that invest and do it in the billions of dollars, and they're institutional. That's what they do. They invest other people's money or their own and other people's money, and they hold on to it for usually a number of years, 7 or 10 years, and then hope to refund a significant share back, usually measured in multiples. So if you invest $1,000 in this company or company, you know, that are $1 million, let's say, at the end of 5 years, the investor hopes to get 5 million, like a significant return on investment, not get their money back. They're looking for a significant, what's called a multiple of their initial investment. There's angel investor groups that every country and every area usually has angel investor groups. And if you just Google angel investors in whatever country or context you're in, I'm sure you'll find them. Excuse me. There's crowdfunding platforms, GoFundMe. There's numbers of them like that. There's impact investors. Now, these are often they're institutional or they're solid, seasoned investors, but they're looking for a double return on investment. They're looking for a return on impact and a return on their money, a return on on investment, a dual ROI, and so they want their money to be catalytic, to make a tangible impact in the world, but they also want to get a return. The whole green energy, worldwide green energy focus is aimed around that type of thing. There's a lot of ESG and different sort of angles that traditional investors are going through to make sure that their money is also catalytic in having an impact, not just catalytic in getting a financial return back. So there's impact investors. There's grants, non-diluting capital. Now that means you don't have to give up any shares of your company. There's usually grants, or called equity free. And so GIZ's example, Villgro does both through our various donors as well. There's different platform, crowd lending and peer-to-peer lending programs. And the new one, I haven't seen this yet, but a cryptocurrency and blockchain, I'm sure it's coming. But that's there as well. In the essence of time, I'm not going to go over the slide on the right, there's quite a bit there, but I'll just speak to the instruments just to kind of demystify. When you own a company, there's shares, and you usually give up shares in return for funding. So people will invest in you, and if you have a shareholding company, that you'll have to give up some shares. You could do that in a few ways. One is just pure equity, that you basically, at the time you receive the money, you give them a percentage of the company, and there's a registrar of companies in each country, and that registrar keeps track of who the shareholders are. You have to register that. Sometimes you need a lawyer, sometimes some countries you don't, but it's sort of, you can go through the process of granting shares to a particular investor, and that's kind of like a pure equity pay. Safes, you might hear the word safes. Okay, it's a safe agreement for future equity. That is, you receive funding, and then the investor gives you money, but in return they get an agreement that when you raise a larger round, that they will be able to convert their equity at a discount or at a valuation, that a company valuation that's very advantageous to them. That's because if they're taking the risk of investing in you and you grow and get larger, they want to be able to say, hey, I was part of this at an early stage, and they get compensated for that risk that they took when you were small. That's the same as a convertible note. It's, a convertible is a debt instrument, but it can be converted to equity down the road. It usually has a date associated with it. So if you get $100,000 in the form of a convertible note, at the end of 2 years or a year, whatever the term is, you as a company either pay it back with interest, or it gets converted into equity into the company. Sorry, 1 second. Or it gets converted into equity to the company. Okay, so those are, those top three. The KISS, Keep It Simple Securities, has gone. It's there, but it's not as popular. So that's the time. I'll just stop there. Again, that's a bit of a background, and happy to have a follow-up conversation about that. Stages of development. I think, guys, this is a further building of the funding envelope. And I'm thinking we might want to, in the essence of time, because we only have 20 minutes, right? And we want to hear from the companies. And so let's bypass this. This slide speaks to understanding what stage of growth you're in and the type of capital providers that will be more advantageous for that particular stage that you're in. Okay, thanks, and we'll hand it over. Let's hear from some case studies. Back to you, Winnie.
Thank you, Rob. We'll be having 3 case studies with us here. We have a team from Core 23 Lab, Rebecca, and then we'll have JP present the next slide, and then, of course, Rahma presenting the other team. Over to you, Rebecca.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I'm going to be speaking about Haki de Femme. Haki de Femme basically means women's right. And I'd like to give you a bit of a background story around Haki de Femme and how it came about. The first thing I would like to do is to introduce you to a woman called Francine. So Francine is a woman who married at a very young age, at 14 years old, and she did not have a chance to conclude her primary education in the system that's there. So based on the education level and the kind of environment that she was in, she was forced to get married at a very young age. And after marriage, in a couple of years, when she had had about 4 children, her husband passed on. After the husband passing on, despite the fact that she was a major producer in her family, in a small farm for cassava production, she realized at the end that she could actually not inherit the property that they shared together after he passed away. This was mainly because of legal proceedings that she was not aware of that happened in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So they are required to actually register their marriage. either through the chief or through a government process. But through the government process, you are allowed to actually select how you will share property with your spouse, something that she did not go through. So in the end, she did lose that property because of not having sufficient documentation to prove that she can inherit that property. But I would also like to introduce you to someone known as Mireille. Mireille got married at an elder stage, but she also had challenges in terms of how she perceived her access to right. One of the key things she had is, though she had land that she could work on, that she had inherited from her family, she did not have the proper documentation to show that this is actually her land. Everyone knew it was her land, but there was no proper documentation around it. So fast forward to a few years later, the Chinese company buys all the property around the community, and the government gives it the ability to take land for mining activities, but they only compensate the landowners who have land documentation. So Mireille missed out on this access. So these stories of women like Francine and Mireille is the reason why Haki the Farm exists. Haki the Farm helps to ensure that women are aware of their land legal rights. And this is a voice-enabled mobile app application, which is available in Congolese Swahili to address this challenge. Because if you look at the scope of land ownership, you realize that only 25% of the population who are women actually own land and have the right documentation. Majority do not have the documentation to prove that they have access to the land. And if they do not know the right steps of measures to take to be able to prove that they own that land, or they can be able to go through the process. So what Haki the Farm does is, first, it offers them information that women actually have a right to own land, access and inherit it, and shows them what laws provide for this to happen. Then it provides them access to legal and financial support, like training them how they should get the documentation, which office they should visit, which documentation they require in order to be able to own their land or properly show that they have proof that this is their land, or they can be able to inherit land or things like that. Another way is to raise awareness to them on the importance of having their marriages registered at the government and to pick the right regime so that they are allowed to own the property that they have built and shared together with their families. But at the same time, because the area we piloted was heavily a mining area, this app also provides them with information on how they can be able to get compensated for land if it is taken by a corporate company that wants to do mining in the area. So we provide them with legal and financial support from the application through linking them to different service providers who can help them get access to get the proper documentation of their land, or even for them to be able to say, I have a piece of land that I want to sell. Can I get the right kind of customer for the right kind of price that is actually fair to them? Because most of these women are not very educated. So our application is impact focused. It offers interactive learning. We have videos for them to learn. It is in Congolese Swahili, but they also have the option for using French. It is through voice, so they don't need to write long text to get responses. They can interact with the bot using their voice and get responses. We offer multiple services, like them being able to sell properties that they have, also being able to get information and support. It's multilingual, like I said before. And most importantly, we make it safe and secure for the women to interact. And one of the things that we have been learning through this mentorship program is how best to engage different women or stakeholders within the land ecosystem, and how they can be able to give input of what they expect technology to do for them, or what areas they think technology can complement the things that they're looking for. And through this mentorship program, we've been able to go through that and be able to identify what value proposition we can give to our customers, and how we can better diversify our data set, because we're building in the open and still be able to cater to the need of the communities that we're trying to address. Thank you.
Over to you, JP.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to tell you a very small story about how, as an organization, we saved close to $400,000 working with 29 organizations in a span of 3 years, but lost an opportunity of earning millions by working with few market players. So the story is, this how it's going to unfold in front of you. I'm JP Tripathi, working with Vadvani AI in India. We work in domains of agriculture and education and health. with an objective of deploying our solutions at the with the marginalized community who cannot afford these solutions. So when we started our agriculture work in cotton around somewhere around 2018, we realized that pink and American bollworms are the major pests which actually damages the crop, and that is these damages can go up to 30-35% in any season for any particular farmer. So we thought of approaching it in a very scientific manner, and we created and based on the agri-tech literature that was available, we created a solution called Cotton Ace, which helps the farmers to identify the pest and disease. The pests of the pink and American bollworms, and basis that it also based on the invasion intensity, it also helps in the providing the necessary advisory for pest controls. So what as a farmer has to do is he has to establish these pheromone traps on his fields, and once there is a catch, he has to empty that. As you can see in the video here, he has to empty that on a white sheet of paper, take the image. The computer vision models helps us to identify the pest, count the pest, and also based on the intensity, it provides the advisory. And then farmers, then you can kind of use the advisory to his based on his capacities. He can purchase the pesticide and use those spray at the farmer level. And this is like the core of the tech. And as I said earlier, that we work with 29 organizations to reach us somewhere around 20,000 farmers in India. And we realized that in the process, we were able to save somewhere around $20 per head per farmer in all these 3 years, which comes around $400,000 in total. So, but during the discussion or when I joined this, the study program, we did this business canvas models. We had a interaction with the mentor, and that's when we realized that actually the impact that we were seeing from a farmer perspective, it is actually quite small, but its actual impact is happening on the market side, wherein whatever the better quality cotton is getting produced, its impact is actually happening at these ginners and the spinners level, which we never envisaged. So when we had this interaction and when we actually worked on the business canvas model, we were able to understand, okay, the smaller impacts that we are seeing at the farmer level is actually eventually leading into much larger impacts at the market player level. So it took, as I said, that it took 3 years to reach the 20,000 mark, and savings was just 400,000. So we did a table work, we did the research focus group discussion with the few ginners and spinners in the market. And we realized that this 5% change that we are projecting here in the slide, even that 5% change was able to provide a difference of $200,000 for a very small spinner. I'm not talking about a very large and a branded spinner who kind of works out in a kind of millions of bales. I'm talking about a very small ginner who processes somewhere around 10,000 bales a year. So even that spinner was able to, based on the I would say table study and the discussions that we had, and I mean under the assumption that this 5% would actually in reality would be much higher than the change would be much higher than that, because nobody tries to give their secrets. So I'm just assuming that even with this 5% of the change, if that 200,000 can actually, part of it can actually come back to the farmer level, I think that the change that we can see would be much higher than what we were trying to do at the working with the grassroots levels. And you can estimate the pain that we have to take to work with 29 organizations spread across 3 years. And here is like 1 or 2 people could have given me much better results, which can actually change the life of the farmers. So yeah, that has been our experience. And one of the biggest learning that we had, that from now on, we have actually started looking at the complete picture of the project. We have started to understand the value chain, where the actual value is happening. And we have started using these tech and the the business canvas models into our other solutions that we have started working on. Yeah, so that has been our experience, and I'm sure like whatever experiences that you're going to hear would add some more advantages to you. One observation that I can see during the chat is like most of the people here are from either working in the health sector or have an interest towards the health sector. Just an urge, like, can we start looking agriculture as an sector or the domain which kinds of affect the
Great pitch. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, see, my point is like people should start looking this as an opportunity to invest or opportunity to work in the sector, because this sector affects their livelihood, which eventually affects the health and education of the family. So that's it. That's it from my side.
Thanks, JP.
Thank
you. That's great.
Over to you, Rahma. Because of time, maybe you could speed up the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Rahma.
Hi, Rahma.
So,
welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to be very quick on this. So I'm going to share a bit of a story to how we came about this application or this solution. So for example, in Arusha, we are Maasai community. In one of the village, we have a school called Ngungati Primary School. So in this school, you might find like it's a primary school whereby students until they reach class 7, they do not know how to read and write properly. So there is where the problem starts. Why do these children reach 14 to 15 years? They don't know how to read and write. Also, they have poor health. So in one case, we found a boy called Manu. Manu is 3 years old boy who has no let's say future of knowing to read and write in a near future because of his poor health, poor parental guidance. So with this kind of problem, as Sea Africa, we came up with a solution of Kiazi Bora, whereby we have information on how to farm orange flake sweet potato, which in this potato, a child of 3 years old can easily correct malnutrition and also can improve their ability to see, their ability to understand in class. But also this orange flake sweet potato can be used to improve the life standard of their homes, because it can be used as a food product, which can be processed into other food products, not only the orange flake sweet potato itself. So with this application, we were trying to solve the problem of lack of information, because most of the people or most of the farmers do not know if orange flake sweet potato can correct malnutrition or can be sold for higher price than the normal sweet potato. But also solving the problem of malnutrition in schools, whereby children for many years do not know how to read and write because their health is very poor. They cannot understand or concentrate in class, but also poverty for their families, because knowing that with the right information on farming orange flake sweet potato, families can earn more income, and women, who are the source of income in most of African homes, are the ones who are the farmers. So with the right information at their hand, they can easily correct this problem. So Sea Africa came up with Kiazi Bora application, which is an open source, and it is voice enabled, because we know most of Maasai women do not know how to read and write. So a simple instruction on how they can use the application, then they can easily get the information they want. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rahma. And given the few minutes that we have, I'll welcome Benjamin to just take us through some of the opportunities and challenges in regards to open source applications. Over to you, Benjamin.
Okay, thanks, Winnie. I'll just be brief on this one. So On the side of opportunities, just beginning with it, I think one of the first things that we notice is that when it comes to the open source applications, we get to see that it grounds some level of autonomy in regards to access of tools. So with this, we get to see an aspect of the enablement of customization, and the long-term effect of it is just to be able to see how it could be able to accelerate innovation through some level of transparency and peer-to-peer contributions among the different developers. I think for some of you on this call, maybe you've had like the case of TensorFlow, which is an open source machine learning framework. And I think over time, we've been able to see how this has gone further to revolutionize AI development by just basically providing access to tools which can be used to innovate and develop complex models. Another thing that we've been able to see in terms of opportunities is with the access to the open source software, there's that to do with cost savings, because one of the things we get to see around this is there's that to do with the democratization of access to technology. And something that goes further along with this is just to be able to reduce entry barriers into the space itself. So I think just looking at it from the bigger picture, it's also for us in the space just to see how we are able to advocate for such public-private partnerships that could be invested in, just to go a long way in terms of maintaining these open source platforms and ensuring there is equitable access to them, because we also know that it takes it takes quite a bit of a cost to maintain the same. And then the other thing is just to do with the reduction in risk and increase in trust. Maybe just a direct example for this, if we recall when we had a couple of inquiries around ChatGPT-2, and this was more to do in terms of misuse when it comes to AI and the likes. Just being able to have this conversation at a global level was able to enable developers to take charge of responsible AI development. And I think even as of right now, looking at where this has gotten to, it's promoting access to open access to auditing standards for AI models, and also ensuring there's access to transparency and trust among stakeholders. Maybe just to wrap it up, in terms of challenges, I think one of the things we see is around some lack of clear definitions when it comes to the space. Case in point is when you look at Meta's Llama model. It's labeled as an open source model, but engaging it with it further, you come to see that there's some restrictiveness in its licenses, which limit its usage. So these, in the long term, tends to sort of like hinder collaboration in the space, and getting to a point whereby we're able to establish sort of like global or universal accepted frameworks for certification will go a long way in aiding this. The other thing is around the gap in skills and access to like compute resources. When you look at the ecosystem of the markets we've been targeting, Africa and Asia, we tend to see when it comes to accessing computational resources, this becomes a bit of a challenge. Even just looking at the resources allocated to the same. So it would be good also, just as the space itself continues to grow, getting to see that there is more advocacy for equitable distribution of resources around the same, and also like just training programs to be able to bridge the gaps that come with the same. I think lastly, one of the things also my colleagues have talked about is the lack of understanding in terms of what we mean by open source. This has kept on changing over time. There's that misconception that open source means free, And this sometimes hinders the development of sustainable business models in the open source AI space. And I think getting to see some of the advancements that have been made by Hugging Face, Red Hat, these have gone a long way in terms of bridging that gap. So getting just to be able to demystify the same and just to get to see what opportunities could be able to come out from what open source has been able to achieve till to date are some of the other initiatives that could just be leveraged on, be able to ensure that in terms of growth of these data sets in Africa and also the growth of open source AI in Africa is able to get to the level that we are looking at to get to. So I'll stop there, Winnie. Hand it over back to you.
Thanks. I'll just jump in, guys. And so time, just want to thank everybody for joining. You saw this was a rather robust and amount of information that was presented in a short period of time. And happy, our team. We're grateful to GIZ and IDRC for allowing our team at Villgro to delve into this for the last few years. Our expertise has grown, and we're happy to be able to share this with you all as well. Obviously, AI is something that's growing on the continent. Its presence is going to do nothing but grow, and I think we're on a good foundation to be able to support companies with this base knowledge that we've gathered, with the support again of GIZ and IDRC. So, again, we want to thank you and honor your time. Thank you for joining, and please do reach out. You'll find us all at LinkedIn. And thank you, Winnie, especially for all the heavy lifting. Winnie's done a lot of the heavy lifting here, and we honor you and we thank you for that. And thanks again, everybody, for joining.